if the goalposts are forever changing, when is enough and when are we enough is actually the crux of the conversation we need to get to for a lot of people.
The fitness industry promoting unhealthy practices. Why do you think that is?
The simple answer is predatory capitalism. Insecure people are much easier to sell to.
And we can get so in this loop, only seeing fitness on this superficial level of what our body looks like.
I know so many people that are invested in exercise solely as a way of controlling the shape of their body. And I think that's almost one of the deepest travesties of the fitness space.
If there were 3 things you'd want people to take away to really put their attention on when it comes to their health and their fitness and their inner well-being, what would those 3 things be? Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers, and today I'm speaking to Dan Osman, a man I've spoke to a number of times, and I love his take on fitness and health and making that really holistic. And we're talking about the kind of dark side of the fitness culture, the dark side of the health culture, the stuff that is behind the kind of chiseled abs and the drive for more, bigger, and how it's impacted him, as a health coach, as a holistic health coach. He talks a lot about his personal childhood experiences around health and fitness. We talk about how we're constantly searching for validation through our health and our fitness and our looks especially. We talk about how to cultivate some kind of deeper holistic health that goes way beyond just how we look, goes to the core of who we are. And we talk about some of the kind of unhealthy practices within the fitness culture as well, and the superficial kind of standards of health and how we can create kind of balanced health. Because ultimately we want to be healthy, and healthy isn't always just about how we look. I always quote there's a Harvard, I think it's study that says like the biggest indicator of someone's health over a long period of time is the quality of their relationships, which is something we talk about in the podcast. But before we jump into the episode, just to let you know, there's a group program I'm going to be running. It's going to be more of a kind of ongoing kind of collective community. And I'm kind of doing the first intake. It might be the only intake, but it's going to be the first one. It's going to be starting in January. So if that's something that's interesting to you, it's going to really be a group of men who are like practiced, who have done the work, who are looking to kind of go deeper in a group of men who are also in the work. So we're not going to be having so many kind of superficial conversations and so forth. We're going to get deeper into and the power of being held accountable by other men who are really in the work and actually to deepen ourselves in the kind of emotional, spiritual, masculinity pieces of that work and relational pieces as well. And if that's interesting to you, there's a form to fill in. And I warn you, it's quite a few questions because really I want the right sort of men in this program. And I've got a number of men who already signed up as soon as they heard about it. And it's going to be capped to 10 people. So if you're interested, jump down to the show notes and you can sign up for that. And then you'll have a conversation with me about your suitability. But without further ado, I'll let you jump into the episode. Welcome, listeners, in another conversation. And today I'm talking to a man who I've actually known for quite a while. We've recorded podcasts together. We quite often, periodically, have conversations through the DMs of Instagram. And then I realized yesterday when I was thinking like, okay, what should we talk about today? That I was like, I have no real idea what he does. So instead of me blabbering on and pretending I know, I thought I'd start by asking him. Hey, Dan, how are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And we did say off air, I don't really know these days. I can't really define it. And I don't know whether that's my ignorance, my denial, but I'm embracing it. Jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. The phrase, 4 phrases. That's what I'm living by anyway. So I guess I would describe myself as more of a health mongrel.
Health mongrel. What was your kind of journey to becoming, as you described there, health mongrel?
A health mongrel. My journey started, I guess, I don't think I ever had a vested interest in health. Obviously, like most people, I recognise it's a facet of our identity and it's quite important to look after ourselves. All my family are Turkish Cypriot, so food was first and foremost at the front of our minds most of the time. It's at the height of all social situations. It's connection, it's love, although it's not literally love. But it was a central hub, I think, at least, for an outlet of emotions or a numbing of emotions, which I came to recognise a bit later on in life. But I guess I wasn't a sporty kid. In fact, what I noticed, and I say I noticed, became increasingly aware of as I got into secondary school is I was in a much larger body. So I guess most would describe that as a bit of puppy fat, and then as cruel and as unkind kids can be, that became a huge focal point. And I guess adults in my life, children in my life, this was obviously a hugely important part of who I am to them. So it must define me in some capacity. So although I was interested in things like football, rugby, I was always the kid with a note for PE, because there was always the prospect of, those were the days where they did skins versus shirts or mixed swimming classes, and just being hyper conscious of my body, I think. And due to some personal, I don't use the word slightly, but trauma growing up, I didn't have the easiest childhood. That's not to get the violins out, but just to paint a picture of what I was experiencing at the time. Food also became a great comfort to me. It became a controllable in the uncontrollable, and it became an outlet to emotions. And I think that became the crux of me coping largely. So although recognising I perhaps wasn't happy with the way I was or how I was representing myself or people's other opinions of me, it did provide that comfort. It provided a pillar of support at a time when I really needed it. And that's taken me a long time to recognise that, because I think for my latter part of my teens and my early 20s, it was almost something I considered as defective part of myself, as inherently wrong, inherently bad about me. And I definitely had my struggles with self-worth and self-esteem growing up. But when I decided categorically things need to change, how I think about myself first and foremost, and perhaps that will have some influence on how others think of me, I took a year out to I worked in a bank, save a bit of money because I wanted to go to uni. And that's when I kind of broke away and ostracised myself a little bit from a lot of the environments and people I was surrounding myself in, getting up to mischief, and nothing too untoward, but getting into mischief and just generally not being the person that I wanted to be or representing myself in a light that I wanted to be seen in. And I went to uni, did sports studies, which was a mixture of science and also management coaching, kind of theory and ethos and psychology behind sport. Decided at that point I wanted to work in professional sport. I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach, wanted to work with professional athletes. There was a heavily subsidised PT qualification. It wasn't even PT at the time. There was a level 2 fitness instructor, essentially wiping sweat off machines and showing people this is a squat, this is a bench press. And I did some voluntary work with the strength and conditioning department at my uni. That allowed me to work with some athletes, along with doing my personal training qualifications. And I got a bit of a baptism into working with the super compliant and adherent, literally athletes that would do anything you ask them to, even if there's a typo on their program of 1,000 burpees, they will likely do it. And then I say soft skills, I consider them more essential human skills. The realities of working with people, the hardest thing of their day is stepping foot in the gym and just moving their body because they've been sat down all day. And I found that a real struggle, but I also think I developed a innate insight into empathy, having some compassion, not so much for myself at that time, but certainly for other people, and applying that to coaching practices and how I actually want to work with people. I did a postgraduate in performance nutrition. I worked with some athletes and just general population from there. And since then, skipping a few years, I've been working in health space in some capacity for about 19 years now. I do corporate talks. I go into organisations. I speak to businesses about healthy practices. I have my own podcast. I do a bit of copywriting. I do predominantly coaching one-to-one, and that is why I can't really define what I do. But it's very varied, and I do really enjoy it. And obviously that comes with frustrations sometimes as well. That wasn't very concise, but that is as short as I can summarise it to be. So I hope that didn't bore anyone.
No, it's quite a journey. And also, it sounds like your journey was kind of born out of the difficulties you were experiencing, the way that people were labelling you, and also, I guess, in turn, you labelling yourself.
Yeah, I think there's a huge element of that, which is we're all subject to that external programming, I guess, where it's very difficult to separate our own values and our own perceptions and what we think we should be and what we should embody. Because I came from more of an archetype of kindness, compassion, the sort of individual I wanted to be. I was a fairly sensitive kid, I guess. I didn't really have any positive male role models in my life. So I don't want to say effeminate, but I was brought up by my mum. I could speak to people, but within that, I didn't really know what a man should be. So it was often looking at, I guess, like superheroes, or if you grew up in the 80s, it was movies of that time. And like, what does the physical embodiment of masculinity and being a man look like? What should I try to emulate? And mixing that with, obviously, there's programming that we're exposed to externally and people's perceptions of that, and a lot of, I guess, sexism, misogyny around that time as well. And that just being a natural part of that time. You know, I'm certainly not going to say it's acceptable, but being in those circles, kind of recognising there's this inner discernment, this doesn't make me feel good, I don't believe this is who I should be. But I became, I guess, a bit of a chameleon. I think that was more of like a survival thing at that time because I experienced so much bullying, is that I was very adaptable. But a lot of the environments I was putting myself in didn't make me feel entirely comfortable. And I probably didn't have the self-awareness at that time to recognise that was something that needed to change until later in my years and my journey. And on reflection, definitely through therapy over the years, is this, even my career choice is likely, as you say, like part of that infrastructure that was built for me foundationally, why I've chosen to work in a certain field. And that was a real oh shit moment for me, because I knew it heavily impacted me and it steered a lot of my decisions over the years, but not to the extent, it's actually my career choice. And that's largely born out of, I think my earlier days, it would have been proving people wrong, or having a lot to prove to people, seeking some sort of external validation, looking to rectify insufficiencies in my feelings of self-worth from that. And I found that even in the initial part of my transition, I guess, into fitness, because although I came through like a more academic route and a more performance-orientated route, when I did step into fitness space, I guess as the elitist that most people will see it as, to begin with, it's like, well, these people have got their kit off, and people only speak to and want to hear from the people with incredible physiques. Well, maybe I need to do that as well. And I began to pursue the other extreme, I would say, of aesthetics. So being this much larger child who was heavily ridiculed based on his appearance, to then seeking external validation, which was largely positive, but relying on that a little bit and recognising, actually, this has to come internally at some point. And that's been something, I guess, I won't say I'm entirely rid of now, because I think with all of these struggles that we had, especially if they're born out of 30 plus years of insecurities or programming or what we're mirroring, role modelling around us, is we get better attuned with hitting the pause button, getting more reflective on it and understanding where that comes from, rather than trying to rid ourselves of it, which is what I did spend a lot of my early 20s trying to do. That, much to what I kind of suggested at the start with treating parts of myself like they're defective. I'm a big fan of Richard Schwartz's work in internal family systems, and that concept really hit home for me, is that rather than think ourselves as an evolution, is we do have all these different parts of us that serve the purpose, even if they no longer do, through our journeys, and to better understand those and communicate with them, if that doesn't sound too wishy-washy, is a more compassionate place to come from, rather than this part of me is inherently wrong or defective and we need to be done with this. And that largely is in some of the work I do with people now, because initially it was the super compliant people that were coming to me with nutrition-related grievances or exercise or performance, and for a lot of people, I found it's actually the deeper rooted issues. That's just scratching the surface, that stuff. But few of us have the self-awareness to recognise that. But I think when people have been through their own journeys and perpetual dieting throughout their lives, and these feelings of self-worth and self-esteem, and why we place so much value in the body, it does take a dig deeper to the uncomfortable parts, the parts we don't necessarily want to wrestle with, that we've been neglecting for good reason because they're just too painful.
Yeah, and it's because, you know, as you were speaking there, I was thinking of my own journey of, I grew up really as a very skinny child, so my bullying was like the opposite end of yours. You know, everyone's saying how skinny my legs and arms were, and I was also quite tall from quite a young age. You know, I'm 6 foot now, 6'1" now, and I was probably this height when I was already kind of, you know, probably 13, 14, 15. I was quite tall for my age. And it's near constant, this messaging you're getting, like there's something wrong with you. Everyone's saying it to you, something, you know, don't say it in those words, right? And a lot of kids will, you know, I'm sure some of the listeners here will look back on your teenage years and maybe even the years beforehand, and you think you made little comments to other people. You said little things to other people. It might be your siblings. It might have been someone you called a kind of quote unquote friend, or just some kids you didn't like at school. But when you hear these things constantly, they really do embed themselves in our brains. And I remember at kind of 17, 18 years old, actually, it was on the back of a breakup, that I started going to the gym, and I was like, oh, great, I can go to the gym. And like started to put on some size, and then you start to get some, at the time, it's like, you know, you start to get some praise from the guys in the gym, you know, when, you know, I'm 40 years old now. So when I was going to this kind of like very much kind of bodybuilder gym in Stratford, when I was 16, 17, it's not the gyms that we think of now. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't nice, and no one was really doing that quite yet. But it was, you know, to get kind of kudos from other men, you know, who were like, oh, you're doing really well, like do this, help. It was like probably one of the first times in my life, I think, that men had paid any attention to me, like older men who were helping and in completely very healthy ways within the gym environment, well, mostly, were actually like supporting and helping me. And it was like a real shift for me because, you know, my own father is in my life, is pretty distant, and I had a stepdad at that time who again was very distant. So it was really, it's a real loop we can feed into that's like, oh my God, I'm getting validation. People are seeing me and I know how to do this. I just keep working hard at this. And we just kind of get into this loop of like feeding the outer shell, the body, and getting the validation we want. And then, you know, getting the acknowledgement from women as well, which, you know, for me at 18, 19 years old, I remember going to university and it was like, oh my God, all these women are paying so much attention to me because I've been going to the gym for the last year. Like, this is fantastic. Like, this is really a wonderful kind of, I'm not going to say self-esteem boost, because to a certain degree, I would say it's a self-esteem boost, but there's also kind of a confidence boost, but there's something more kind of superficial. At the time, I wasn't aware of it again, but it was more superficial. It was like external validation. It's really external validation of like saying that I am good enough, I'm decent, I'm somebody. And we can get so in this loop of this and seeing that this is the only thing that really kind of matters. And we see that that is fitness, only seeing fitness on this superficial level, you know, this outside level of what our body looks like. And, you know, we might look after the food we put in because, you know, we know that the food helps, but kind of stopping at that and that only being the thing that we kind of pay attention to.
I certainly have echoes of that, and that's the point I alluded to about, you know, external validation. Or I describe it as essentially I went through my childhood of being invisible or visible for all the reasons I didn't want to be visible, and then having lost a substantial amount of weight, gone to university, certainly never had any girlfriends or any female attention before that, and there being this curiosity and this interest and this, I guess, denial to a certain degree. It's like, oh, people are interested in me. Like this must make me a better person. This is what the world wants of me. And being a little bit uncomfortable with that, and again, not having the self-awareness at the time, but this must need upkeeping. You know, people are interested in me. They're interested in my training programs. They're interested in what I do for exercise. They're taking a real fascination in me. And as you said, certainly no interest from girls before that, but perhaps now for the first time. And what I've come to realise over the years is actually I don't want my body or my appearance to be a focal point at all. Is for all of the stuff that I initially wanted, the very primitive stuff, is just to be recognised and seen and made to feel like a good person. And that was always in the eye of the beholder. I never saw that in myself. And I guess those basic things slip away from what our peers tell us, social media tells us, society tells us, our parents tell us. You know, that little inner critic is often the words of older, considered more authoritative voices in our earlier years. And a lot of that was mirrored back to me, and I've certainly been crueler to myself than anyone else has ever been cruel to me. But even now, I find to a certain degree, it's just that if someone, even if it's positive, comments on my appearance or my training, like anything to do with that, it makes me uncomfortable. You know, so almost it was what you said initially at the start of the conversation. I don't really know what you do. I actually felt quite comfortable with that. I was like, okay, so this guy that I speak to through DMs and have got to know over the past couple of years, he just wants to know me, maybe. That's the story I'm sticking to. Don't smash my illusion here. But maybe that is not to do with what I do for a professional, what my training looks like. And I find those deeper conversations are more welcome. My latter years, as I get older. But I've almost gained less tolerance for the surface level than the superficial, which is why I feel so despondent with the health and fitness space at the moment. Because health is hugely subjective, we know that, but it's not singularly, you know, single-digit body fat 365 and living out of a Tupperware box. Because I can reflect back on instances where my practices were inherently unhealthy, but people are still associated with health. So when I was at university, I was running the fields every morning and I was cycling around campus and I was doing 3 weight training sessions a week and I was doing kickboxing twice a week. Exercise became a little bit of a pillar of support, and that controlled around my food. I wasn't eating a lot at all. I was experiencing bouts of depression at that time, low mood, low energy. And that tied into how I felt with myself because, again, I felt like something inherently wrong with me, but everything I was getting externally was telling me I was doing a great job. So why would I change it? If I'd never experienced that, why would I change that? I was getting so much reward for it. And although I felt slightly uncomfortable with it, it was new. It was the novelty of positive comments from people for the first time.
And you mentioned there, you see the kind of fitness industry, or maybe you didn't say in these words, almost promoting unhealthy practices. And why do you think that is? That's a simple question to start.
The simple answer, which is obviously very much more nuanced, is predatory capitalism. Insecure people are much easier to sell to, which is why fat loss and diets and fads, they're essentially different. They're turds rolled in glitter, is how I describe them. They may have a prettier exterior, but a lot of these things are largely the same foundationally, and that they have a definitive start, they have a definitive end, they need a bout of super compliance adherence, but there's no ingrained education or sustainability or realistic aspects addressed with that. Socioeconomics, there's no, genetic traits considered, there's no underlying health conditions, there's no behavioural kind of, screening is what lengths are people going to maintain these, because they have been evangelized and put on a pedestal as reflective of health. We can't define someone's health just by their appearance, but gaining an understanding of where they're at, the practices they're employing, we do get a more broader picture of the trajectory of where that could head. So even with, we can say that about adiposity and people in much larger bodies. You could have someone that's in a much larger body, hugely active, look at their bloods, everything's in line as it should be. They're not at risk of type 2 diabetes, their blood lipid profiles aren't high. But to look at someone as a snapshot, judgment gets a bit of a bad rep. We do judge people. That's just an inherent part of us. As an indicator of safety, is this person a threat? You might hazard a guess that person is unhealthy, but you don't definitively know that. Whereas we don't apply that same logic to people that are ripped, 365 and muscular and ostracize themselves from social situations. The whole life revolves around their exercise habits and their eating routine, and that's healthy in the eyes of a lot of people. Bodybuilders, There's nothing healthy about bodybuilding, and it's the only sport out there where it's acceptable norm that you get more shit. Your performance gets worse the closer you get to at your best, in air quotations, on competition day, where you're essentially controlled starvation. You're living off very few calories. Your expenditure is hugely high, but you're putting yourself front and center in front of strangers to essentially say, I'm good enough to receive a placing here, or I'm not. And they can scrutinize your body even more. And some of the best shape, again in air quotations, if we were to judge people on that, people I know of are also the most insecure about their body shape. Mm. There's this hugely perceptive thing, and I think that lends itself to so many other aspects of our life. It's our perception of what success is, our perception of what beautiful is through the eyes of others, is irrespective of the actual facts available to us. And we tend to dwell on those rather than apply that logical thought process to it. And that's something I'm now hugely invested in helping people with, as well as myself. Because that is an ongoing work, and that is the entirely unsexy sell in the realms of predatory capitalism. It's not an easy pitch for people. And it, to sell something that says you might need to go 10 steps back before you go 2 steps forward, and then you might go another 5 steps back to people, is not what they want to hear, but often the reality of it.
It's what they really need. I guess people are, like you said, we're so focused on the packaging and other people's perception and wanting other people's perception of us to be good.
There's echoes of that in the work that you do with people when you unpick this stuff. Is largely, these concepts of masculinity and what being a man should be and how they should communicate with their partner and what gender roles they tick the boxes of. That is not inherently something we've decided ourselves. That's what we've been told. And that's what we've decided. But we don't reflect and look deeper and actually, what do I make of that? Like, what does my partner make of that?
It's like we don't really get taught that our view of ourself is important. We're continually bombarded with, like you said, capitalism is telling us what we should be like, what we should consume, what we should look like, what we should sound like, how we should act, the jobs we should do, that we assume that the outside forces, these outside people are right, in the terms of bodybuilders. And I went to a couple of bodybuilding gyms for probably best part of 10, 15 years. And I know a guy that died, like heart failure, right? The number of drugs he was putting himself through and so forth. And you see some of these, like you said, the practices, but it's this idea that if other people approve of me, then maybe I'll actually approve of myself. And I've seen this in so many guys. Them asking questions of other people, like, what do you think of my triceps? Like, what do you think of my calves? And things like that. And I always remember a day, I was about 26 years old. I was in a gym. And I said, one of the guys noticed, he was like, Dave, you're not benching much at the moment. I said, yeah, I've got about 70 kg on there. He was like, but I've seen you bench more. And I just said, I'm not trying to get any bigger anymore. And he looked at me with this confusion in his face. He couldn't understand. He's just confused. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm happy where I am. I said, I'm really happy with how I look right now. So I'm just going to maintain, man. I'm just going to maintain. And the look of confusion on his face, like he just couldn't understand that there wasn't this like more, bigger, better. And I feel like the veil of lifted on my eyes. I was like looking at myself as my body was. And I was like, oh, I'm happy with this. Like I know these other guys want to get really, really big and all this kind of stuff. And I've got no interest. I'm really comfortable. Actually, maybe I'm going to lose some weight because I'm tired of my jeans being really, really tight or the shirts being difficult to buy. But it's so easy for us to like find ourselves in these places, whether it's gym, whether it's just in regular life, feeling like other people's opinion of what we should do is the truth, leaving us with this very kind of like our own self-esteem, very kind of underdeveloped. Like we're viewing it as unimportant. And it feels like, from what you're saying, I'm hearing you say, and some of the things I've seen you talk about, that your work is not just developing the outer of someone, but actually like going deeper than that. Like the fitness isn't just the body fitness. It's more, I'm hearing like not just even mental fitness, because that's just maybe the mind, but like a kind of self-fitness, developing that self-fitness and health internally and spreading outwards?
Self is exactly the word that I would use, because it's relationship with self, first and foremost, I think, with a lot of this work that I do with people. And often, especially with relationship with food, it's nothing to do with food. And if you look at the extreme end of muscle dysmorphic disorder and you look at eating disorders, it's control variables, it's behavioural patterns, it's based on feelings of people and themselves that lead them down this route of it being reflected in their behaviours, however unsavoury or unhappy they are with that. It's nothing to do with the plaster, is what I refer to it as. Is we often go to the latest exercise routine or the latest food plan, but that's the temporary plaster. But the deeper wound is what needs addressing. And often it starts with this. And I know it's become a bit of a hashtag, the mindset work. And, viewing the well-being spectrum, that's financial well-being, spiritual well-being, it's the social connections in there, and it's exercise facets, and it's your sleep hygiene, and it's your nutrition, is all of these elements together. And that is largely reflected in, once you address people's perceptions of themselves and they can pick away at their understanding of that, where that came from, it's reflected outwardly, or at least there's a compromise in that perception. So they recognise what society is telling them and what others are telling them, and others hold in high esteem and value, actually isn't that important to them. And there's something quite empowering about that, stepping away from what everyone else views as successful. And you spoke about the gent that looked at you in awe because he couldn't quite believe you're actually content and happy. And I think that's so applicable to other parallels of life. Is success is people have aspirations of earning a certain amount of money, and people move those goalposts, and that just becomes that void, I think, is that if the goalposts are forever changing, when is enough and when are we enough? And I think that when are we enough is actually the crux of the conversation we need to get to for a lot of people. When do you feel enough? When do you feel satisfied? When are your needs met? What are your values? Are you living aligned with them? Rather than, are you trying to keep up with the Kardashians or the Joneses? Or whatever it may be.
It must be quite confronting for people to kind of work with you in that way, this kind of holistic health, holistic fitness, to come to you and have these ideas that maybe they're still quite tied to the opinions of others and the way people see them. What's your experience of people when they kind of realize that coming to you is a more holistic model? Is there some resistance that you often encounter with people, or particular patterns you see come up for people in resistance?
I won't say never. I think it's better these days having just the means of reaching people in which we go, podcasts, social media content, writing, whatever it may be. I think, people are doing the due diligence. They are doing their research before they reach out to work with people, which I think is great. They should do that. It's a big commitment, especially when they're investing in something like you or I for their health and identity and perceptions of things. So it's less so these days, but I've discovered transparency from the front. As in, I've got a vast support network, if you like, of people that may offer services that I don't. So if someone's coming to me with strictly aesthetic-based goals, that's not really the work I'll do. I'll say that from that initial conversation, and I'll perhaps refer them on, or, I'll describe quite candidly what I do and I don't do. Food plans is another one that people often come to me with, and I could do that, and I could charge for that, but that's not how I prefer to work with people. And sometimes cutting my nose off to spite my face, because, as I say, the predatory capitalism, that is more sellable. That does have the glitz and the glamour and the sexiness appeal to it. But I'm very candid and honest with people. And then there are others which you feel are more teetering on the edge. They are slightly invested in the deeper rooted work, but then they recognise that's going to be harder. And I guess resistance might be the wrong word, perhaps reluctance. But I think that's anything new. That's all of us for anything new. There's something I speak to others quite often about, is this safe unhappiness that a lot of us find ourselves in. This space that I can recognise my circumstances are unhappy, the behaviours that I'm, investing in, and the people I'm surrounding myself with, and everything else that I'm doing isn't serving me right now. But I know I can endure this. I know I can get through this. And although I'm unhappy, that's a level of unhappiness I can tolerate. Whereas the prospect of doing anything new brings about this unsafe aspect. This is all of a sudden unsafe unhappiness. And the prospect of venturing out and trying something new means that, I don't know whether it's an innate negativity bias many of us have, we catastrophize. We think this is going to be so much worse. We go to the worst possible scenario. We don't think of the prospect that actually things could be much better, but I've still got to try something new. And that takes a lot of people to come around. I often describe people that come to me as I'm a little bit of a last resort. Maybe they have done the years of perpetual dieting and recognise there's something a bit deeper rooted they need to address. And I've never been one for the hard sell, so I'm always very frank and honest. Not cruel, because I think sometimes honesty delivered without compassion is cruelty, as we have of so many talking real talk on social media these days. But I'm very honest about what I do and I don't offer and how I think that best serves someone. And then they just make an informed, educated decision from that. You know, I love to work with people, but I think that mutual trust is established from the very off, and I'll always be honest with the people that I work with, the same as I always expect them to be honest with me. There's nothing off topic. I'd want them to come to me with challenges they're experiencing, because then we can navigate them together. Whereas if I brought someone in through the front door, almost the fancy shop front, and the actual shop is a shit show, that's a different story. And many people do that in the coaching space, and you'll probably have loads of experiences of that. People have come to you that I've had this terrible experience with so-and-so because they've been attracted to the glitz and glamour, the sponsored ads, and been promised the world and essentially been delivered nothing. Whereas I like to give people everything that they have at their fingertips and perhaps what I don't offer, but this person might be better suited for you.
Yeah. What I really feel from you saying is like, it's an integrity, is it like a way of working that's like really is like grounded in integrity and truth and honesty. You know, in comparison to a lot of what we see in the fitness industry is, you know, the transformational pictures, like this person lost half their body weight in 4 days with my program, you know, that type of thing. And
but how did they feel? No one tells you that bit. How did they feel? How did they impact their quality of life?
Yeah. And how long did they keep it up for? Like, that's another thing you see is like, okay, someone went from here to here in 6 weeks, but what were they like 3 months down the line? How were they feeling? Like,
anyone can be adherent for a short amount of time, I think. And if I was to offer anyone like the meal plan, I'd say, eat cod and broccoli 4 times a day. You'll lose all the weight you want to in 4 weeks' time. There's no secret in that. It's just an extreme calorie deficit. And there's nothing healthy about that approach and your attitude towards food. People will see that as success, but it says nothing about how you feel at the end of that. And that's the thing I get curious about, is that a lot of people, they're wrestling with this cognitive dissonance, is they know that, but they still do those programs. And it's only, I guess it's like any behaviour change, it's only when that individual is ready to step away and do the truly uncomfortable work that is worth their time. And I don't want to force anyone into a process they're not entirely comfortable with. So I totally understand, and perhaps that's more of a compassionate view of it, is that people will do these things despite recognising it's not best for them sometimes. But that's their place they're in right now. There's many accounts, I think, of, you know, people that have been told. And just to give an example off the top of my head, so my mum's friend was told years ago, there's hereditary lung cancer in the family, or hereditary cancer. Her mother died of lung cancer, and this lady smoked 60 cigarettes a day. And she was giving a pre-warning many times over the years, until a few years back she had to have a triple heart bypass. She still smokes. Wow. I mean, if there's not incentive there, there's never going to be. So if that individual doesn't want to change, no one can force them to, even when the threat is literally their lives.
Yeah. And I guess I see parallels with this in the kind of relationship space where people are warned by their partners, like, if you don't change your behaviour, I'm going to leave. You know, the relationship's going to end. And they don't change anything. And even when the relationship does end, there's a kind of, I see some people, to create a reality where they're right, they have to believe that it's not the thing their partner's been telling them that caused a relationship to end, that there's something else. You know, and I'm always really fascinated, and I don't come across many of those people too often. Like, every so often I do, not too often. And they're some of the most interesting people, because then I can make really big self-awareness shifts in them when they can see that actually it was their behavior that caused the relationship to fall apart and not that their partner secretly was cheating with someone else or anything like that. It's like, it's the things that they told you about for 15 years or 5 years, whatever it is, that actually caused the downfall of your relationship. I see the parallels with the health thing. It's like, it's this thing that's really obvious that's going to cause you to like be in ill health.
I call that, if it fits your biases or if it fits your narrative, is we've all got a certain story that we tell ourselves to justify our behaviours, and there's blame that comes into that. There's self-stigmatisation, there's stigmatisation of others, it being about them and not being about us. What's your take on, I don't want to say forced change, but when you're dealing with the relationship dynamics and a partner has been communicative and very vocal about aspects of the relationship they're not happy with, do you lean more on the compromises necessary, as with all working relationships, or if this person is trying to force change upon me and I don't want to change and they don't accept me for who I am, this is just who I am, live with it? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah.
I think that, again, there's parallels there. Right?
Yeah. It's a really tricky area because I believe as human beings that our purpose on this earth is evolution, right? Is to evolve ourselves, our bloodline, and evolve human beings, like the human race forward, right? That's all we really come here to do. We come, we evolve, we do a little grain of sand of evolution, we move on. So if someone's in a relationship and they are like, my partner should just accept me as I am. My point is they should, but they can accept you. That doesn't mean they're going to stay with you. I can accept that. I don't know. Maybe I can accept that my girlfriend smokes 20 cigarettes a day. But I choose that that's not an environment that I want to be in. That's not a space that I want to be around. And I can remove myself from that relationship and I can accept them from afar with and it might sound weird, I can accept them from afar with no contact, right? But if I sit angry in my heart, that's not really acceptance. So you can request someone to change. You can show them the path. You can show them the benefits and all these things. And even you can embody that change. I think that's one of the most powerful things to do, I see in a relational sense, is like really embodying the change. And if they're not inspired to do it for their own reasons, then walk away. I actually, this might sound odd as a relationship, I'm often telling people like that I speak to, and if I coach and they're in a relationship and I'm happy, I'm like, you need to walk away. My advice is to leave. I don't advise very often. It's not really part of what I do, but often people, that is one of the things, and sometimes that's the greatest gift you can give to somebody. I'd say about 80% of the men that I work with come to me because of a relationship breakdown. Their relationships have broken down completely and they didn't heed the warnings. They didn't listen to the requests. They thought that it was just nagging and that sort of thing, or they weren't aware of the implications. And anything from a month to 18 months later, they're talking to me and they're like, I'm such a dick. I fucked up a really good relationship and I don't want to do that again. So often what I see is walking away from someone, obviously attempting to change together, evolve together and so forth. But if someone really doesn't want to go on that journey, unless it's a relationship you can really compromise and be happy in, if you're just going to be miserable with that person, walk away. Just walk away for your own sanity and so forth. And I think the biggest problem I see for people is often they don't have the confidence and self-esteem and belief that they can find something else great. So they stay in bad relationships and they continue to complain about it, which I don't think is necessarily it's a hard balance to find, isn't it? It's like if you're in a bad relationship and you choose to stay in that relationship, then I then recommend acceptance. You must come to a level of acceptance for your own joy and happiness. And you may find that actually transformative for the person you're with, or you may not.
There's so many overlapping features there, I think, with health and fitness and just general behaviour with people, that some cost fallacies. I've invested this much time into it. I have to bear with to make it work. People do exactly the same with their health. The unsafe and safe happiness is, I can accept, stay put up and shut up, or I can do something about it.
What do you find?
And that's relationships, that's health, that's finances, that's a lot of things.
What are the parallels you see with people's fitnesses to kind of what I was saying?
I think the social interaction and actually being communicative, communication as a whole, I think is something that's overseen. And I see this in quite a lot of the dehumanizing language that online space about leads and prospects and pain points, and communicating with people on their terms, I think is a hugely important part of relationship building, as it is coaching. As we're all brought up with a different lens we view the world from, different upbringing, different parents, whether we want to get into attachment styles and communicative skills there, that's another something else to navigate. But trying to meet your significant other, I guess, is the biggest, or your coaching, or whomever you're coaching, in a language that they understand. Because one of my favourite phrases, I can't remember even where it came from, is communication occurs on the terms of the listener. So we're communicating in our best, and that's not often interpreted as our best in others often. And I quite like Stuart Hall's work on encoding and decoding practice. It's like we all have this encoding process that we go through when we communicate based on the vocabulary we've got, based on the communication skills that we've got. But we're also putting that on someone that has their own separate decoding process. And my intended message, as it is on this podcast, as it is when I speak to anyone, and how I hope to be seen and understood, isn't necessarily someone else's reality. They're going to have their own way of deciphering what I've said, or, drawing their opinion based on it, which is, we see that in the dynamics of social media conversation all the time. Someone's talking about relationships or fat loss, and someone's in the comments saying, well, you don't care about Ukraine. It's like, no. that's your lens at the moment. That's not all we're talking about. But, people have their own lens. That lens is tinted, which is why I think many of us sometimes can make ourselves the centre of everyone else's universe, where actually that's not realistic, but we are the main player in our own movie. And that's what I try to draw my attention to these days.
Yeah. One of my teachers always, he kind of put it this way. He's like, you want to be able to communicate with, he talks a lot about relationships with your partner in a way that they can metabolize and digest. Like, because it's them that's going to hear the information and have to digest it.
Health and fitness analogy. I'm stealing that.
Because
sorry, I interrupted you.
No, because so often we're so like, I want to tell them this thing and I want them to know this. And you go, well, he'd say, he's like, you need to pick a time and place that they can hear you, and you need to deliver the information in a way that they can hear you. I think so often we say that it's not a responsibility of how people hear us. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that's somewhat irresponsible and sometimes quite toxic, because it then goes, I have no responsibility and I can just say what I want and it's your problem how you hear me. Because actually, if I'm communicating and I want to be heard and understood, I must take responsibility for how you can hear me, or at least putting things in a way that I believe you can hear me, not how I think you can hear me, how I know you can actually hear me and understand me, so that we are, on a plane of understanding.
Yeah, those feature in our everyday lives, whether that's personal or professional relationships. And certainly I can notice differences between my wife and I. Like, I'm probably the more overly communicative one, whereas she'll quite often need space to process and dissect that. And we've been together 18 years, perhaps earlier on in our relationship is, I want to seek resolution without an understanding. Actually, she needs time to process, and then she'll come back to me. Then we can resolve things. But we've all got our own little agenda with that sometimes. And it's difficult to find that pause when you're in the heat of the moment and words are flying around and people are saying things they don't necessarily mean, is to take that pause and actually, this person needs this and I need to deliver it in that way is quite difficult, but also very necessary.
It's quite a skill.
Definitely. And that's why I think again, soft skills are glazed over. I see them as basic human skills. Just communicating with people is just a skill that lends itself to every facet of life, whatever your profession, whatever your marital status is, that's going to lend itself positively. So we should give it attention. It shouldn't just be, these are my words, take them, what you will from them, with no responsibility. There's always a more delicate and careful way and considered way we can deliver a message, I think, which is, I understand the polarised and sensationalism behind a lot of social media messaging. That's what captures attention, and it's actively rewarded by the algorithm. But that wouldn't be my preferred way to communicate with people. And again, I think that lends itself to the being authentic, representing yourself how you wish to be seen. And, you know, if you've done your best and someone else's interpretation of your best is not reflected in that, there's only so much responsibility you can take. There's responsibility all around to be taken.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I find that part of social media quite difficult. The way in which you're kind of pushed to sensationalize and polarize and be reductive about messages. I found myself on someone's reel recently, and it was a woman, a very well-known social media psychologist, and she was basically saying that, like, when a man sees a beautiful woman, he either is in awe or he is disgusted, I think was the phrase. But it was, she gave just two options, and I felt compelled, because I guess that's what it does, to just explain that, like, come on, there's nuance here. That, like, you know, in my work with men, what I've noticed is that sometimes they see a beautiful woman and they feel in awe. They do feel in awe. Sometimes it's that they feel attracted, so they feel curious and interested, scared, afraid, like all these different things, all these different emotions. And sometimes there's disgust or hate, or that comes from anger because they don't feel they could ever meet and talk to a woman like that, and all these other things. And I said, it's not useful to just, as two very well-known people in their field of relationships and psychology, to have such a reductive, like, video out in the world. And the person just replied and was like, yeah, that's all really true what you've said, but this conversation is just really generalized. And I was almost quite shocked. I was like, wow, like, you two personalities are, like, really happy to be like, yeah, we're deliberately creating content that is really basic and generalized and just riles people because, you know, it speaks into that particular reel, why that wild me is, it speaks into this idea that men hate women, right? And that riles women up, right? Because they're like, yeah, men hate women, fuck men. And it just feels so irresponsible to kind of feed that monster, because I know, and, you know, ladies, listen to this, I totally understand that many of you had good reason to hate men for the things they've done. But there's also a lot of reason to, like, be super appreciative of the wonderful men that do exist in the world and do either wonderful things or just have such a limited net impact, whether that's positive or negative. And I feel that so much of the content I see that's, like, there to anger women more into their kind of anger.
Yeah, it's the polarized. That's what draws the most attention, whether it's Instagram, whatever social media platform you're using. It doesn't care about whether it's positive or negative attention.
Yeah,
that bit of content is getting, as long as it's getting attention. So I guess that's probably one of my biggest bugbears, is the individuals I know personally and have had conversations with separately that know better, that choose not to do better, that reinforce all these false dichotomies that people believe, the black and the white, whereas actually, okay, it's not as marketable, it's not as profitable, but we know a lot exists in the grey or the nuanced. That's where we should revolve around the conversation. But you haven't got Instagram representatives going through, oh, this is good content, we should push this out to someone. This is catastrophic for people's mental health, we're going to remove that. It's just what gets the most clicks. And that's when, you know, other podcasters, as I'm sure you will know, name no names, they lean on that. They bank on that click revenue. They don't care whether it's negative comments you get. As long as you're making clicks, that puts money in my pocket. And as long as you're sharing those clips, and that's why I've always got an air of caution about these reaction videos as well. So there's definitely a way to do that, but that doesn't. But I guess the sharing it to stories and pointing people in that direction, they're just going to head to the comments. They're going to add to the eyes on that. They're going to pump up the views. And what does it actually do? It benefits the person that is behind the content creation, and they know that. So if you're calling people names on social media, or a well-known podcaster giving out titles like exercise is useless for your health, or, why you should sleep less. All of these things, people latch onto those because they know it's bullshit, but they want to have their take on it. And I think that's where it's very difficult to separate ego. And look, I've been there many times. I know going into people's comments, I'm either going to be bombarded by their devout followers or I'm going to be ignored largely. Because I think a lot of people get on, especially with online debates and communication, with this intention to be respectful as possible, or they potentially put forward the fact that, I'm open to having my mind changed, but realistically, they just want a pat on the back like everyone else. They want those little dopamine flashes from people, that external validation, those likes, those shares, and, whatever else that may bring. But it's very difficult to step away from that. And I struggle with it all the time. I'm constantly reevaluating my relationship with social media because realistically, I know that is a huge aspect of my job, but not one that I do willingly as much. I do it as a necessary evil. I do enjoy elements and parts of social media, but I certainly don't enjoy the amount of time I have to spend on there, or the time that I spend in content creation, which essentially gets nowhere because, again, the polarised and sensationalism is so rewarded. And then, again, it's that choice, isn't it? I can do the same, and I know there will be potential reward with that, or I can cut my nose off to spite my face a little bit, stick to my guns, stick to my values, and sleep easier.
Yeah, but it's a hard balance to strike because it's like, I know what a lot of people do, right? And it's they have a front-facing, give them what they want. Give them what they want, and on the back end of your work, give them what they need, right? It would be the equivalent for you, for instance, and I'm just making this up, right? Is like body transformation after body transformation, meal plans, and then when they come to you and they start working with you, you're like, actually, let's get deep into like what's been your story about food through your life, like how did people treat you? What did people talk about when they came to food in your household when you grew up? How did people treat food? Like, was it something loving? Was it something that was like scorned? Did you see your mother and father dieting all the time and like trying to cut calories and getting deeper into it? I know that's exactly what a lot of people, I know loads of content creators / small businesses do. I personally kind of struggle with that just simply because I want to educate in a way that's truthful to me, which is like the world is full of nuance. And if we ignore the nuance, is actually what creates polarization, because there is so much nuance. But nuance is complicated for people to hear and it gets boring, I think, when people start reading that and they kind of tune out. So then you've been murdered by the algorithm anyway.
It's a constant battle, and I think we're very aligned with that. Is almost skipping out that shop front, because there's two elements to that conversation. I think is almost, it's slightly deceitful because although you are giving them something that they want, you're not being entirely transparent with what you actually deliver. So I see it from that aspect, but also, who am I to decide what someone else is going to get from my service? And maybe the only person that this is of detriment to is me. And, that's a conversation on a daily in terms of what we put out there. But I think ultimately that nuance, that graze, if I can keep pounding that drum, I'm going to at least attract the people that I enjoy working with, that are going to get the most out of working with me, rather than coerce someone into a process they might not be entirely happy with. Especially with the deeper rooted stuff, much to what you do, it's a longer drawn out process. It doesn't have a definitive end sometimes. Sometimes it's ongoing. And that, again, is a harder sell. This stuff is worth doing regardless of the outcome. But people shoot for that outcome in the age of, Amazon Prime, where we can get something delivered the next day. They want to see what they're buying. They want the end product. They want the result. But with coaching in any capacity, I think is ongoing and is not always definitive end. Much like the message I try to share with health and fitness, I guess, is, exercise especially is, I know so many people that are invested in exercise solely as a way of controlling the shape of their body, but there's countless research papers and documents and people talking about the benefits to your health and reducing all-round risk of mortality based on just moving your body, whatever you choose to do. And I think that's almost one of the deepest travesties of the fitness space, is that people aren't aware of these things or they choose to ignore them, that singularly just moving your body occasionally is great for your health and longevity. But the only reason I'm going to do it is just to lose weight or just to get a little bit leaner.
What are some of the ways in which you often see ignored by fitness professionals that can contribute to someone's kind of good health and fitness? Like, you know, we know obviously moving the body and certain types of movement. People are now seeing sleep as something that's kind of important. Obviously, the food that we put in our bodies. But what are some of these more lesser talked about mechanisms that create, I want to say good health, but I feel like there's a better phrase for it, but I'm going to stick with good health all round?
I think realising how multifactorial it is and talking about those different facets of it. You know, we talk about reducing cardiovascular risk, increasing bone density, reducing the risk of osteoporosis, reducing blood lipid profiles, untangible, unmeasurable aspects of mental health that can be improved just by nourishing your body a bit better, being a bit more hydrated, getting to bed at a reasonable hour. Those aren't really spoken about, but I quite like to get into values and adding layers of value as to why we do these behaviours and why it's worth doing, irrespective of whether we feel like it or not with people. So sure, someone's initial impetus to get involved in physical activity might be to change the shape of their body, but I'd also like people to be able to go for a walk because they quite enjoy getting out. They recognise the benefits, that it's good for their headspace to get away from the screen, that being out in nature is great for their mental health, not just because it's contributing to my 10,000 steps a day and that's going to help with my fat loss. And I think when we start to unpick and add layers of value as to why we act out these behaviours, that is true discipline, not in the elitist sense, but that is, I have enough of a reason to do this regardless of how I feel about it or wanting to do it or not, because I recognise the bigger picture and how this is going to lend itself to my quality of life overall, being a more present partner, being a more active parent, all these other aspects. And those are what I really like to unpick in conversations with people and try to highlight on social media as well, as much as you possibly can with limited captions boxes. But yeah, the other reasons why we do it, and I spoke about the wellbeing spectrum, is it's not just, you know, your body shape or why you must follow a meal plan that's going to help with your performance. It's how does this improve relationships in your life? Do you feel more productive at work? Do you feel you think and you perform better? You know, your feelings, is your mood more in control? Does that stop you from gravitating towards caffeine and high density, high fat, high sugar items all the time? Do you feel better when you take all those things out? Like, how do you feel? That is often the conversation that we miss when we talk to people. You know, what's your perspective of yourself? And it can be the smallest things, which aren't, I guess, again, marketable on social media. Is quite recently I had a lady, she went on holiday for the first time, just jumped on the slides. They went to a water park, just jumped on slides, wasn't worried about her body. She was just having a great time with her kids. And she allowed pictures to be taken, something that had never happened before. And okay, that's not a before and after picture, but I'd see that as a less tangible but life-changing aspect that they've got out of that process. That's not a certain amount of kilos lost or, you know, this person's reached single-digit body fat levels in 6 weeks, but that then means they're more present in their holiday, that they've had a better time with their kids, and actually it can come away from that and they've enjoyed the experience rather than worrying about, you know, largely benign things that aren't important to other people, but has been for them for a long time. And yeah, that's really difficult to communicate online.
Because it's the inner experience, right? It's that, like you said about the walking in the forest, for instance. Like I use myself as an example, right? So I try and go for a walk every morning. And where I am now, it's just like mainly houses. But if I drive 5 minutes, I'm in the forest. And I prefer to go to the forest because the forest feels nicer. It just feels nicer. There's not houses. There's not car sounds. It's just like more peaceful, more relaxed, more easeful. And I will take my time, and it does feel really nourishing, really nice to be in the forest. It is also nice to like move. It's nice to get out in the morning. I found that it's like better for me. But it's like, it's where our focus goes. It's like, is it the outer experience that other people are going to see about me? Or is it the inner experience that I have? And I think it kind of comes back to the predatory capitalism. It's like capitalism doesn't want you to feel that your inner experience of life really matters. It wants you to see that our experience of life is what really counts, because that will keep you consuming. You know, you can't commodify walking in the forest. Well, I guess you can in some way, but you know, that isn't something.
There's someone out there doing it.
Yeah,
definitely.
You know, I guess someone who's selling, you know, forest walks on a grand scale, or you know, I remember reading someone who was selling like Canadian forest air to people in China in jars, which I thought was a great idea. But yeah, it's that our inner experience of our lives, like the woman you talked about, her inner experience of like feeling comfortable and confident and carefree. That's really valuable. But as you said, like no one else you can't put that on a photograph. You can't put that inner experience on a photograph, or you can't put it in a way that other people are going to be like, man, I want that. Maybe a little testimonial, you know, of video sorts of thing. But it's like, it's not so easy to sell because it's not a straightforward plan, step by step. Like take 5 steps and you'll be like, just like her, because it isn't. There's actually this windy road that has many different points on it.
I think that's a conversation around personal pride as well, and actually feeling proud of yourself. Something that I'm constantly trying to remind my daughter of, because she's at an age now, she's 8, and she always wants mummy and daddy's approval. She wants us to be proud of her. Of course we're proud of her, but I keep reminding her, are you proud of yourself for the amount of effort that you've put into that? I think when we become adults, we essentially experience so much of the world in survival mode, in this disembodied state. You know, much to what you were saying, that embodying yourself, like how do I feel in my body? Where's my breath? What am I thinking? What am I feeling right now? What can I hear around me? We don't get pause for that. We're just surviving on the rat race, and people are so caught up in that busyness. They don't have that pause. They don't get the ability to reflect and actually recognise they're unhappy with the circumstances. Many of my highest earning friends are deeply unhappy in their jobs, but it pays for a certain lifestyle, and that certain lifestyle is acknowledged by other people, and that is placed at the top of the hierarchy of needs for them at the moment, and no one can change their mind on that. And of course I've got my opinions, they're my values, but they're not asking for those, so I can't force them upon them.
Yeah. And it's a really, and especially if you've, imagine those people, if you've grown up in a certain circumstance of life, like having a lifestyle that leads to comfort in many ways, is an easy explanation for being really unhappy in our jobs, for instance. You know, like I can resonate with that, because I had a really wonderful lifestyle for many years in a job I really hate and made me miserable. You know, and I grew up seeing that my parents hated their jobs, and that's just how you feel about work. You know, we again comes back to it, like our inner experience doesn't really matter. And I guess my parents were immigrants to the UK from Jamaica, so maybe for them survival, they were born into survival. But we're now in a point now where like we can lift ourselves above that, and that also includes kind of what I'm hearing you say, and I think I'm saying too, is that includes putting more focus on our own inner experience as important and valuable.
Definitely. I think that is missing from the conversation for a lot of it across the board. And I think if it doesn't sound too deep, it can allow you to feel a bit alone at times when you feel like you're one of the few people talking about these things. Or, you know, I know we've had deep conversations about these kind of things, and they're the conversations I find more fulfilling, which I said to you, my tolerance for the surface level wanes a bit the older I get. There's still place for that, of course there is, but I think when I get to know people, and perhaps it is a facet of recognising we're all getting older, we're not around forever, those are the kind of relationships I want to invest more time and energy into, because they are with more like-minded people that share the same values and can't expect everyone to view the world the same as I do.
Yeah, as much as we would love them to. Yeah. Oh, Dan. Yeah, I was just minding the time, and the time is running away with us. It's all such a pleasure to skate across these many topics.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on my podcast for another chat. So perhaps we can do part two on there.
Yeah, I would love to. If there was I'm getting down into this very reductionary way of thinking. If there was kind of 3 things you'd want people to take away to really put their attention on when it comes to their health and their fitness and their inner well-being, what would those 3 things be?
There are many ways of doing it, but I think getting aligned with your values and actually reevaluating what they are, because they're in a constant state of flux. They will change with responsibilities and certain goings on in life. Get to the bottom of those, and I find that's our compass almost in terms of dictating what health behaviours we're going to pick up. One really basic one, I think, for everyone, whatever their kind of subjective view of health is, I can 100% categorically say that if everyone was to get off their phones earlier in the evening as non-negotiable, put that in the other room and get to bed an hour earlier, they would find that just snowballs into every other aspect of their life in terms of what they choose to nourish their bodies with, their caffeine intake, their water intake, how motivated they are to exercise. That is just one of the ones that seemingly insignificant things I think people oversee because they're always looking for that magic pill, but getting to bed a bit earlier, essentially. Lastly, which I think parallels with some of the work that you do, is have open, honest conversations with the people around you. So establish that support network, seek out like-minded individuals, people that are going to encourage you or support you the way you hope to be supported through a process of any change, and not necessarily cut away the people that aren't in there. I think naturally distance is created when you change your values or you kind of lean into them a little bit more. But I think within that is boundaries, you know, so dissecting, if you like, your environment that you're in, having conversations with the people within it, and creating boundaries about what you will and you won't do, because you better recognise what serves you longer term.
Beautiful. I love that, man.
Just tangents off the top of my head. I don't know whether any of that made sense.
No.
It did to me anyway. That's the way my brain works.
No, beautiful. And I imagine the listeners are wondering now where they can hear more of you, work with you, bring you into their companies.
Yeah, I'm not on many things. I have my own podcast, Dan Osman's Rambling of a Madman. That is very self-stigmatising, but if you can't poke fun at your own mental health, whose mental health can you poke fun at? I write a blog, I have a newsletter. I'm mainly found on Instagram at the.dan.osman, LinkedIn, and I don't really use Facebook. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to speak to anyone that wants to chat about this more.
Awesome. I'll put all those links in the show notes, so listeners, you can just hop over in there and you can, follow all that. And lastly, I'll say, listeners, if you've listened to this episode, you've enjoyed it, and you've enjoyed this really kind of holistic view on health and fitness, there's probably somebody in your life who you feel could really do with, rethinking how they look at their health and fitness and going a little bit deeper. So please feel free to send the episode over, just share it out, send it over to them. I know often we can feel a bit of apprehension, or we feel like we're judging someone, but in fact what you're really doing is really supporting them and helping them and showing them a lot of love in what they're dealing with, what their challenges are, or what they're trying to improve in. So I really implore you to do that. I've had many a wonderful episode sent to me by a friend and really enjoyed it. But with that, I'll let you get on with the rest of the day and say a big thank you to Dan.
Appreciate you, Dave. Thank you for inviting me on.
Cheers, man. I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world, especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening to this episode, you think, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them, share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.